Hey everyone, Cody here. And today I want to talk about pruning the branches and burning the ships. Now they seem kind of different as far as the ideas go. They're maybe similar but different, but they're going to tie together and I'm going to bring it home, I promise. So let's talk about the first part, pruning the branches. What do I mean by that? Well, essentially, I mean cutting out anything in our life that is drawing us away from God. And there's a lot of things, I'm going to cover them, at least my own personal kind of testimony to this, and just the growth I've had over the last few months, especially over the last couple of weeks, and what I've done in order to get closer to God. And I'm going to talk about that. But before I do that, I want to share a verse that is going to help illustrate the point. So this is Jesus in John 15:2. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. This idea is this struck me the other day because it's so important and I just never really grasped it. But essentially what Jesus is saying is, one, he cuts off branches that are not fruitful. And if you think about a vine, if you think about a plant in general, any branches that are dying or dead or broken, they, it basically takes away nutrients from the main part of the plant. In order to keep it healthy, you trim those off so that the nutrients stay healthy, that they stay going into the parts of the plant that are actually sustaining it, right? That are producing leaves or producing fruit or producing, more of itself. And so this idea that Jesus has of trimming the branches, first off, just cutting off anything that is not of God, but also pruning the branches. And so, you prune what's left. So you basically take away everything that's not of God, and then you also prune the things that are kind of still there, that are still kind of maybe distracting you. So I want to talk about some examples of my own life and why I even brought this up, because God kind of put this on my heart to talk about it after I read that verse and just realized how important it was to prune and trim branches. So essentially, over the last few months, I've been going through an incredible growth with God. Like, I have a love for God, a desire for God, an obsession for God that I've never had in my entire life. And it just came about with me reading stuff, and then God kind of leading me to certain videos online, certain people online on YouTube, like Isaiah Saldivar and Vlad Savchuk, David Diga Hernandez, Richard Lorenzo. And you may not agree with all of the people, but a lot of these people have really helped me in understanding, how serious Christianity really is, how deep it is. If you really take the time to want to love God and know him more, you will make that effort to dive deep. And so I've just been, growing a lot. And so I started off by trimming the branches by cutting out secular music. So that was the first thing to go. I decided that I wasn't a huge music person anyway. I listened to music when I was on, but I myself only had a few bands that I just kind of rotated through over and over again. I never really listened to certain genres or, certain radio stations. I just listened to these few bands over and over and over on repeat. And eventually I just, I even got tired of that and just music in general. So I was kind of already not in a place where I cared to hear music. I don't like to go to concerts. I've been to concerts and I'm not a big fan of them. But I knew that the stuff I was listening to, for the most part, it was not godly. It was secular, and if you think about it, you can say, well, there's a lot of music out there that isn't godly, but isn't also bad. And that might be true. But for me, I just realized that if I wanted to grow closer to God, I needed to substitute the stuff that wasn't God for God. And so I cut out secular music. And a while back, after that, I decided to cut out secular shows and movies. And this is tough because there's a lot of shows I like. I like The Office. I love The Office. But in watching these shows and watching a lot of the stuff that's on TV now on streaming services, it's just so bad. There's cuss words all the time. Or, there's blatant sex scenes. Or there's a bunch of anti-Christian values in the show, or things that go against the Christian standard. And it's just really hard to watch that stuff and not be affected. And I know a lot of people say, I'll fast forward through those scenes. Well, technically, you're still watching it. You're just watching it faster, so you're actually consuming that content faster, especially if it's a sex scene. You're like, oh, you're fast forwarding, and you're like, I'm not going to watch it, but you're literally watching it to see when the end of it is. So you're still affected by it, and hearing it over and over and over and over, you don't think that affects you, but it really does. Everything that you consume affects you at some level. And so I decided to cut out secular movie and shows. That's a little more tough, I think, than just the music thing, because what do you entertain yourself with? And I'll tell you what the substitute for me is finding good Christian people to read books of, listen to audio podcasts, to listen to podcasts from. So read books, podcasts, and YouTube videos of, and just really substitute all of that secular stuff I used to watch with just godly content. Like, if you think about it, your body is the same way. There's foods that you do not like and you probably will not eat. However, if you starved yourself long enough, for days, you'd probably get to a point where that thing sounds good. And I'm not saying that will be the case for everyone, but I know it is for me. You see, I've fasted for days, and after a few days, even saltine crackers sound like a gourmet meal. And that might be a little hyperbolic, but saltine crackers sound good. Or vegetables. And I don't eat a lot of vegetables. I know I should. And vegetables sound really good after a few days of not eating. So if you start to starve yourself with these other things, of the things that you're not doing anymore, then you will want other things, and you can substitute that with godly substitutes. But here's where it gets really tough, I think. So for the last few days, I've been fasting, and I'm done fasting today. So, I feel comfortable in sharing this whenever this video goes up. But over the last 4 days, I've been fasting where I've only been eating one meal a day. And I thought it was going to be a lot tougher than it is, but it's actually amazing. So I'm just eating after 6. So I can eat, whatever I want after 6, between about 6 and 9. And I say that because if I eat after 9, then I start to get acid reflux, and I just feel like crap the next day. So really between the hours of 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. That gives me, 21 hours of not eating food so that my body can work through all the food that I ate in those few hours. Now, I'm not saying I gorge myself. In fact, fasting the last few days has really decreased my appetite. And I really wanted to, God to move in these last few days. And he did, just not in the ways that I expected. But doing the fast has been amazing, because it's just shown me that, God, sometimes food has such a hold on us, and we really don't think about it, or maybe we know and we're just not unwilling to give it up. But I tell you that these last few days, I thought that I was going to be super hungry, and I thought that I was not going to have any energy. It's the opposite. I have more energy, and I feel way better than I did when I was eating 3 meals a day, or 2.5, or 2. So it's just fasting. I've heard a lot of people just talk about intermittent fasting, and I've never really done it, but this is amazing. I love it. I don't know if I'll do it all the time. I think I want to keep trying to do it more, though, because it's awesome. And, there's religious reasons and health reasons, but if you're doing it for religious reasons, then you got to have a reason for going into the fast. Now, I ultimately recommend, if anyone can do a full fast where you're only drinking liquids for X amount of days, at least 3 days, that's really, really good. Like, you can really feel God moving that. But I'm not recommending, I'm just saying, from my personal experience, I definitely felt God more when I couldn't eat, and every time I got hungry, I just prayed. So the last two are probably the big ones that are probably a much tougher sell for a lot of people. The first one is caffeine. So I work in coffee. I roast coffee for a living, and I decided to give up caffeine. It gave me migraines if I didn't have it. And it got to the point where I would just consume caffeine, and I would get tired, and I wouldn't even stay awake. So it literally wasn't even serving the purpose of its intention, right? And I understand how caffeine works. It doesn't really give you energy. It just kind of tricks your brain into using more energy that it already has. So then you're more tired later because you kind of overexerted. But I understand that. And it's still it served no purpose for me after a while. And so I decided a few days ago when I started fasting to fast from caffeine too, and actually give it up. And the first couple of days were a nightmare. I'm telling you, the first couple of days were so bad. I had massive migraines. I was super nauseous, like just all day, those couple of days. And because I wasn't eating throughout the day, I couldn't take medicine. So it was like compounded, and it was just really bad. But yesterday was the third day, and I still had a migraine throughout the day, but it really wasn't like, it was manageable, right? And today, no migraine. So in doing that, like, I just, a lot of people say like coffee isn't bad. And then, I understand a lot of Christians drink coffee. I was, and my wife still drinks it. But for me, it was breaking that power of addiction. So I wanted to break that addiction power, which leads me into my fifth thing, and probably the most serious. I give up drinking. I'm not a heavy drinker, but I would come home and drink 1 or 2 drinks a day. So technically speaking, I was an alcoholic, and I'm not proud of it, right? And I just, I think there's a lot of Christians that are like, oh, they defend drinking, they say it's okay. But the Lord really convicted me of that. Like, I would just come home and just immediately turn to that. And I would turn to that like even before God. So it had become an idol in my life. Now, I'm not going to bash anyone if they do drink, even if they're Christian. I guess you could. But for me, it was, I just wanted to eliminate anything that wasn't of God. And it wasn't benefiting me. Alcohol only kills your body. It doesn't, it's not good for you. So ultimately, I just decided to cut it out. And I decided a little over a week ago to do that. And I literally drank one time in like the span of like the last 8 days, and it wasn't even a full drink. I put alcohol in some sweet tea that I was drinking, and I couldn't even drink it because I felt convicted, so I dumped it out. Now here's where, and so I've done all these things, and I just feel amazing. I really, really, truly do. And not just in a godly sense. Like, God really moved over this last week, like in a lot of ways, and I can get into that later. But I feel like just the physical benefits of it has been awesome. Reducing food, reducing caffeine, reducing alcohol. Like, these are all things that we could feasibly do, and it would literally improve our life, and we're just so unwilling to do it because we're so tricked into thinking that we need those things when they're really just crutches and false idols. Now here's where the second part of this comes in, and it's burning the ships. So essentially that phrase just means burn the ships, as in, it came from this, I don't know, some warlord or some person that was going to war. He took his troops across to some island, and so that he basically gave them no way out, they burned the ships. So the only choice they had was to fight. And so for me, I kind of took that as, there's no looking back. So maybe instead of burn the ships, you could think of burn the bridge. And essentially just not looking back. Like, you're putting yourself in a place where you have no backup plan, or you can't look back, or you can't go back to the way you were. And so I did that. So with the Christian music, I deleted all the music off my iTunes and replaced it with Christian music. Slowly but surely built that up. With my, the music and shows, like I said, I basically uninstalled all those apps, Netflix, Hulu, all of them, and just started replacing it with, Christian stuff, so that when I wanted to watch something, it was Christian. And I won't lie, I still have Facebook and I still have Instagram, and it's really to connect with people that I know. And there's some non-Christian stuff on there, but even that is limited. I limit it very heavily. And as far as the, for the fasting, I basically just set limits on myself. I can only eat after 6 o'clock. And I had my wife hold me accountable, and just didn't allow myself to drink anything that wasn't water in that time. Now for the alcohol and the caffeine, I mean, burning the ships for the caffeine, I still have coffee in my house because my wife drinks it and guests drink it, but it doesn't have that hold. The last couple of days, I just don't care that I can't drink it. Like, it really is not something that I don't want it. I don't care. The alcohol is the big one. And the alcohol is the one that I kind of wanted to highlight and brought this to bear, I guess, brought this to the light. I went through my entire house and threw every alcohol bottle. And I probably had like a dozen open, like tequilas or vodkas or, you know, whiskey or whatever. Margarita stuff, like just anything that was kind of, that would be alcohol, I threw it out. I dumped out every bottle, and we had some bottles that that we had collected because they looked cool. I took them down because for me, I don't even want to look at the empty bottles and get an idea to go back to. You know, both of my parents were alcoholics, and I love them to death, but you know, I knowing that, like, and having my history and still also drinking, like, I just don't want that to be my kid's history. But also, again, it's pulling me away from God. There's no benefit to drinking. You know, people say it relaxes them, or, you know, they're a social drinker, or they're whatever. But that just proves that there's something lacking in your life that you're substituting with alcohol. And you're not giving that over to God, or you're not spending that time with God. You know, I'm going to save money by not buying alcohol. And I'm going to feel better at night and the next day because I'm not drinking alcohol. And I'm going to save my liver and my kidney from not drinking alcohol. You know what I mean? There's no downside to it. And there's no downside for me to kick caffeine either. You know, now I can build up my body's natural reserves of energy again. So there's really no benefit. And there's a reason that God has such strict limitations on us pruning those branches. Like, there's a reason we should not be basically ruled by anything other than God. And anything that you put above God, everything that you just cannot break because you don't want to, because it has a hold on you, is a false idol. And that means you're worshiping that thing. And God even says, even in the 10 Commandments, you shall have no other gods before me. So, that's basically it. I wanted to share one last verse before we go, and it's Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. The reason I share that verse is because it really illustrates, and by the way, this is my updated memory verse tracker. I think it looks pretty slick. It's a lot better, I think, than the one I used to have. So if you want to check it out, it's on Amazon. You can just search memory verse tracker or something, or I don't know, maybe there will be a link. But anyway, that verse, so the two parts. The first part is not conforming to the patterns of this world. What does most of the world do? They listen to secular music. They watch secular movies and shows. They drink. They drink caffeine. And, you know, they eat whatever they want and just not think about the consequences. That is the patterns of this world. I mean, there's a lot greater things, don't get me wrong, like, you know, sleeping with whoever you want, or deciding that if you don't want a kid, you can just axe it. But keeping it in context of what we're talking about today, cutting out all of the things in your life, pruning the branches, is the only way to continue to grow a healthy relationship with God. He can't bless sin, and he can't bless the things that are not of him. So why would you even want them? I know it sounds like I'm just being zealous, right? Or I'm being extremist. But the truth is I've never felt closer to God than I have this week. Ever. In my entire life. I'm 36, I believe. I've been saved for 16 years, for almost half my life. And it took me this long to really soak that in. So the other part of that is testing God's will, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Dude, like, how else would we be able to test God's will unless we were set apart and living in a godly way? Because if we're conformed to the world and we're doing everything that the world is, then we don't know what God's will is. This is so many people who don't sit down and actually read their Bible and spend time in the secret place praying to God and asking him to reveal himself. These are people who call themselves Christians, probably never read the full Bible, take verses out of context, go to church on Sundays, and probably that's about it. Maybe they go to a Bible study. Maybe sometimes they serve every now and then. Sunday Christians. And I'm not calling anyone out specifically, but complacency is killing the church. And this spirit of religion is killing the church. This right here, not conforming to the patterns of the world, and pruning the branches. This is how we change as Christians. This is how we grow as Christians. This is how we become what God intended us to be, to step into the things He has for us, because we're not so busy wrapped up in our own things that we're so focused on all of the things that the world already does so that we can look like the world. But no, we change it and we step into these things that are difficult sacrifices. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying any of this is easy. What I'm saying is it's better, right? The Bible says that all things are permitted, but not all things are beneficial. You can listen to music like that. You can drink. You can smoke. You can do what you want. You're your own person. But just because you can do those things doesn't make them beneficial. Keep that in mind. That's pretty much it for the video. I just wanted to share that. Felt it was a very important message, and I am going to share this probably everywhere because this is probably the most serious video I've ever done. And that's about it. I will see you in the next one.